Generations after Joseph's time, a new pharaoh arose in Egypt, one who did not know Joseph or his contributions. He saw the Israelites multiplying and feared their growing numbers, thinking they might one day rise against him. To curb their strength, Pharaoh enslaved the Israelites and subjected them to harsh labor. But still, they grew in number. Enraged, Pharaoh issued a terrifying command. Every Hebrew boy that is born must be thrown into the Nile. In this dark time, a Levite woman named Jochebed gave birth to a son. He was beautiful and strong, and she was filled with hope. For 3 months, she hid him from Pharaoh's soldiers, praying for his safety. When Jochebed could no longer hide her son, she crafted a basket and placed him among the reeds of the Nile. Trusting in God's protection, she let the current carry him away. But Miriam, the boy's sister, stayed close, watching over him. Pharaoh's daughter saw the basket and opened it, finding the crying child inside. Moved with compassion, she said, "This is one of the Hebrew babies." Miriam, watching from a distance, stepped forward with courage.
"Shall I fetch a Hebrew woman to nurse the child for you?"
Pharaoh's daughter agreed, and Miriam brought her mother, Jochebed, to nurse the child. In God's providence, the boy's own mother was able to care for him until he was old enough to live in the palace. Moses grew up as a prince of Egypt, educated in the wisdom of the Egyptians, and trained in their arts of war. Yet, he never forgot his Hebrew heritage. His heart ached for his people as he watched their suffering. Even in his youth, Moses showed a heart for justice. When he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave, he could not stand by. Though still young, he boldly stepped in to defend the man. Though Moses lived as an Egyptian prince, he struggled with his identity. He was drawn to his people's suffering and longed to bring them relief. This internal struggle would shape his destiny as God's chosen deliverer. As Moses grew older, his heart for the Israelites grew stronger. He began to see the injustice around him and longed to stand up for his people. But his journey to becoming their deliverer was just beginning. The birth of Moses was no accident. It was a testament to God's plan and protection. Even as a child, Moses was marked by courage and compassion. Little did he know, the God who had saved him from the waters would one day use him to part the sea and lead his people to freedom.
Moses, Moses, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I have seen the misery of my people in Egypt. Go now, for I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people out of Egypt.
Moses, though hesitant, obeyed the Lord. With his brother Aaron, he stood before Pharaoh, demanding freedom for the Israelites. But Pharaoh's heart was hard, and the Lord unleashed 10 devastating plagues upon Egypt. When Pharaoh hardened his heart and refused to let the Israelites go, God unleashed his judgment upon Egypt. These were the 10 mighty plagues, each striking at the heart of Egypt's power and its false gods. Moses struck the Nile with his staff, and the river turned to blood. Every stream, canal, and reservoir in Egypt followed. The fish died, and the water became undrinkable. Yet Pharaoh's heart remained hard, dismissing the miracle as trickery. Next, frogs came up from the rivers, covering the land. They invaded homes, kitchens, and even Pharaoh's palace. Pharaoh begged Moses to intercede, promising to release the Israelites. But when the frogs died and were piled into reeking heaps, Pharaoh hardened his heart once more. Aaron stretched out his staff, and dust turned into gnats, swarming over people and animals. The magicians of Egypt could not replicate this miracle, declaring, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh refused to listen. Swarms of flies filled the air, tormenting the Egyptians. Yet, in the land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived, not a single fly was seen. God made a clear distinction between his people and the Egyptians. But Pharaoh remained defiant. The Lord struck Egypt's livestock with a deadly plague. Horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, sheep, and goats perished. Yet not one animal belonging to the Israelites was harmed. Even this did not move Pharaoh's heart. The Lord instructed Moses to toss soot into the air, and it became a fine dust that spread across Egypt. Painful boils broke out on people and animals alike. Pharaoh's magicians could not stand before him. Yet Pharaoh refused to let God's people go. The Lord sent the worst hailstorm Egypt had ever seen. It destroyed everything in the fields, people, animals, and plants. Only the land of Goshen was spared. Pharaoh confessed his sin, but quickly reneged on his promise to free the Israelites. Locusts swept over Egypt, devouring every crop and tree. The land was stripped bare. Pharaoh pleaded for mercy, but as soon as relief came, he hardened his heart once more. For 3 days, darkness covered Egypt, a darkness so thick it could be felt. Yet the Israelites had light in their dwellings. Even this miraculous sign did not move Pharaoh. Finally, the Lord struck down every firstborn in Egypt, from Pharaoh's son to the lowest servant, sparing only the homes marked with the blood of the Passover lamb. In his grief, Pharaoh commanded the Israelites to leave. God's judgment had brought Egypt to its knees. With Pharaoh's permission, Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt. But freedom would not come easily. Pharaoh, consumed by rage, pursued them with his chariots, intent on bringing them back into slavery. After leaving Egypt, the Israelites journeyed toward freedom. But soon, Pharaoh's heart hardened once more. With his mighty army of chariots and soldiers, he pursued them, determined to bring them back into slavery. The Israelites, trapped between the sea and Pharaoh's forces, were filled with fear. As the Israelites fled Egypt, the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud by day, leading them on their journey. The cloud provided direction, shielding them from the scorching desert sun, a visible sign of God's presence among his people. At night, the Lord turned the pillar of cloud into a pillar of fire, lighting their path and protecting them from the dangers of the desert. It was a constant reminder that they were not alone. God himself was leading them. When Pharaoh's army approached, the angel of God, who was traveling with the pillar, moved to the rear. The pillar of cloud stood between the Israelites and the Egyptians, creating a wall of protection. To the Israelites, it brought light, but to the Egyptians, it brought confusion and darkness. Terrified, the Israelites cried out, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt?"
Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still.
Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water, so that the Israelites can go through on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, so they will follow you, and I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army."
By the power of God, the Red Sea parted. A dry path appeared in the midst of the waters, with towering walls on either side. The Israelites stood in awe, their fear giving way to wonder. Pharaoh and his army pursued the Israelites, their chariots entering the path through the sea. But God was not finished with his judgment. The Lord threw the Egyptians into confusion. Their chariot wheels jammed, and they struggled to advance. Realizing their doom, they cried out, "Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." When the Israelites had crossed safely, Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. At daybreak, the walls of water crashed down, engulfing Pharaoh's army. Not one of them survived. The Israelites lifted their voices in thanksgiving. "The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. The horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea." They had seen the power of God and knew that he was their deliverer. Though their journey was far from over, the Israelites had witnessed the mighty hand of God. They were no longer slaves, but a chosen people, on their way to the land promised to their ancestors. Thank you for watching this episode of Bible in a Tale. If this story inspired you, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another story. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Remember, God is always ready to part the seas in your life if you turn to him. Take this moment to repent, trust in Jesus, and follow his path. God bless you, and see you in the next story.